Hello and thank you for joining us again on another episode of Explore and Escape. I'm Mai El Shoush. Today I'm here at the Herndon Historical Society's Depot Museum, located right in the heart of downtown Herndon and along the Washington and Old Dominion Trail. Originally built in 1860, it was then converted into a museum which now houses several exhibits, including those about the railroad, Commander Herndon and Herndon life.
Hello, I'm Barbara Glakas, and I'm the historian of the Herndon Historical Society. Herndon is a great place to live and to visit. There are many reasons for that, and one reason is because the town preserves and celebrates its history. I'm standing here next to our 1860 train depot, and off to my other side is the original Washington Old Dominion Railroad track bed that has since been converted into a hike and bike trail. That trail bisects the town, and it's a very popular amenity.
Hi Barbara, thank you so much for being on our show today. It's really great to have you with us, and thanks for giving us a tour of the museum.
Thanks for coming. Let's go take a peek at the museum.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first room we'll look at in the museum is the station master's room.
Well, this looks really interesting over here. Can you tell us a little bit about what we see here?
Sure. This is the desk where the station master would have sat to watch for the trains out the windows, to operate the telegraph and the telephone. On the wall over here, we have the two earliest photos we have of the Herndon Depot. One was from about 1890, and the second one was from about 1905. This is one of our newest exhibits. This is an actual old antique telegraph. It has the telegraph key and the sounder. And attached to that, we have a computer. So the computer and the telegraph can talk to each other. If I turn it up, you can hear the telegraph going. Herndon had a telegraph in the 1870s here in the depot that the station master would use. And then later on in the early 1900s, telephones came to the town of Herndon. Here on the wall we have an example of a 19-teens early candlestick telephone.
Okay, so Barbara, I noticed this really interesting piece of furniture in this room. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is?
It's good that you noticed this. This was one of the original pieces of furniture from our 1860 depot. The station master would hold mail and telegrams and freight receipts. Here's an example. We have some original freight receipts. This one, for example, is from 1914, and it shows that grocer Benjamin McGuire had picked up 2 boxes of peaches, 1 box of beans, and 3 sacks of sugar. On the wall over here, we have different train schedules from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. In this room, we also have a variety of railroad lanterns. The glass on the different lanterns of different colors would mean different things. The model you see here was made by Historical Society member Richard Peck in 1979 for the town's 100th anniversary. It shows a scene from about 100 years ago. Railroad service stopped in Herndon in 1968. The railroad tracks were taken up and they were cut into pieces. And what they did with these, they made even smaller pieces that they cut and then labeled it as a piece from the W&OD Railroad to give to people as souvenirs. The next room we're going to go into is the waiting room. This is a room where passengers would buy tickets and wait for the train.
Barbara, I noticed there's a few items in this room that are honoring Commander Herndon. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, Commander William Lewis Herndon was the namesake of our town. On the wall, we have an actual photograph of him. Right here you see a papier-mâché model that was made of him back in the 1980s by some Herndon High School art students. Commander Herndon was a U.S. Navy officer. In the 1850s, he was commanding the ship, the SS Central America, that you see in this model here. He was transporting gold, passengers, and mail from the California Gold Rush up to the banks in New York. On this map, you see the route that he took. He did the second leg of the route from the Panama Isthmus up to New York. But unfortunately, in 1857, he ran into a horrific hurricane and his ship sank. On the wall here, we have a New York Times front page from September of 1857. This entire article is about the sinking of the Central America. It was a national catastrophe. They were talking about the wreck and listing over here who had been saved and who had died. So how did the town of Herndon get its name? It just so happened that shortly after the SS Central America sank, a stranger came into town at the same time that the villagers were trying to figure out what to name their post office, a new post office that was going to go here in this depot. Well, the stranger told the people about the brave Commander Herndon and everything he did to save most of the women and children on his ship. They were so taken by his story, they decided to name their new post office Herndon.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about some of these Navy items that you have here in the museum?
Yes, the reason we have these Navy items here is because Commander Herndon was considered such a revered hero that the Navy built 2 ships in his honor, the USS Herndon. One of them was in World War I and one of them was in World War II. And the parts you see here before us are actual parts off the ship, and a lot of these items that are on the wall were donated to us by veterans that served on the USS Herndon. May, have you ever seen this monument?
Well, I have seen something like it at the Herndon Town Green, just behind the municipal building.
You're correct. We have something like it. What this one is, shown in the picture, is the Herndon Monument on the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And what we have here on our town green is a 1/3 size replica of this, the Herndon Monument, which is our town's Veterans Memorial. And next to the picture of the monument, we have a report that Lieutenant Herndon wrote. Before he was the commander of the SS Central America, as a lieutenant, he explored the valley of the Amazon. And this book shown here in the case is the report that he submitted to the Congress in 1854. The third and final room in our museum is the freight room. The freight room holds artifacts that represent Herndon life, such as schools, churches, businesses, etc. It took the Herndon Historical Society several years to collect these artifacts. The freight room is where freight would be held when it was brought in from the train. What many people don't know is behind this wall is an actual freight door where the freight would be rolled out onto carts, onto a platform, and loaded onto the train.
This radio looks amazing, Barbara. I really want to know a little bit more about it.
This is neat. This is a 1930s Stuart Warner radio. Radios like these were sold in the Herndon garage that used to be located on Eldon Street. It still plays today.
Let's have a listen.
This is an old penny arcade machine from about 1913. It used to be in a drugstore that was over on Station Street. You put a penny in it, put your eyes there, press the button, and you can see lots of different scenes and pictures. Here's an example of some extra boxes of pictures you would see. Let's give it a try. Many Herndon visitors really like looking at our clothing display. Many of these dresses were donated to the Herndon Historical Society by Herndon residents. They formerly belonged to their mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers. The uniform on the left is a Navy uniform from World War I that belonged to Frederick Robinson, who was a businessman in Herndon.
Can you tell us what this cape over here represents?
Yes, Herndon was very proud of its volunteer fire department. This cape is part of a uniform of the auxiliary of the volunteer fire department. The ladies' auxiliary would raise all the money to buy the equipment for the fire department. And the fire department started in the 1920s. We have some fire boots on the ground and a jacket, and some pictures here of the early fire trucks, which are essentially Model Ts with chemical pumpers on the back. And the brass plaque on the wall was once on the first fire truck of Herndon, stating that it was bought by the Citizens Association in 1920.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the school items that you have here on display?
Yes. One of Herndon's oldest schools was the Herndon School, located on Center Street. And the building is still there today, but it's been since renovated and it's now a residence. We have this shutter that came off the original school. We also have this desk that dates from the 1920s. So the school existed in this building from 1868 to 1912. And then a new school was built, but that new school burned down. So we think they returned to this building for a while, possibly. We also recently found some old school books. So we have 6 school books that were in the old Herndon School. These books date from the 1880s and 1890s.
So Barbara, I understand that there was a time when Herndon was sort of known as the capital of the dairy farm industry in Virginia. Is that right?
That's correct. In the late 1800s and the early 1900s, Fairfax County was the dairy capital of Virginia. But most dairy farms in Fairfax County were in the Herndon area. We're shown here, we have some pictures of the Middleton Dairy Farm that was located down Centerville Road, but we had farms all over the area. Down here on the floor, we have some dairy farming equipment that came from the Folly Lick Farm, which was on the north end of Monroe Street, owned by the Young family. This piece of equipment is an electric pump where you would put these teat cups on the teats of the cows and then turn on the pump, and it would automatically pump the milk out of the cow, unlike in the old days where people had to pump the cow by hand. We also have in our museum displays of old milk bottles and milk creamer bottles that belong to different dairy farmers that were around our area. We also have a variety of very old milk cans. You can see that the farmers would put their initials on the milk cans so that once they came back at the end of the day, they could identify which cans were theirs. We have this one small milk can that has the initials on it, WIR, which stands for William I. Roby. He served in the Civil War. He also was a grocer who had a store in the bottom of the Nachman building where the Green Lizard cycling shop is now.
So just delving into the history a little bit more about the town, were there any Civil War activities in the area?
There were. We had one skirmish in town that happened at the depot when a Confederate, John Singleton Mosby, raided the downtown area because there was a picket or a guard station here by the 1st Vermont Cavalry of the Union. We have pictures in the museum that show Colonel Mosby and also Major Wells, who was with the 1st Vermont, and also Laura Ratcliffe, who lived nearby, and she was a Confederate spy. Other than that, we had lots of activity. Troops moved through Herndon back and forth all the time, both Union and Confederate. And we even had a Union Corps once in camp here for a few days. Okay. What I have here is a Union breastplate that was found behind a house on Monroe Street that was formerly the house of Kitty Kitchen Hannah, who was a resident in Herndon during the Civil War. And in her memoir, she wrote about how Hooker's Corps had encamped in Herndon and how they were trampling through her yard and knocking on her door and asking for water and food and ran her well dry. And we think that this breastplate may have come from one of those Union troops.
So I noticed these arrowheads over here.
When the Herndon Golf Course was being built in the 1970s, they found many of these arrowheads on that land. And since then, we've had the arrowheads dated, and they're thousands of years old. So Paleo Indians were once in the Herndon area. They did not encamp here, but they were foragers. So they would move into the area, hunt, and then move on.
So what do we have here on this table?
Well, what we have here is a very simple display of some artifacts that were found in Herndon's Runnymede Park. Runnymede Park is a 58-acre natural park on the east end of Herndon. And that land over there used to have farmers over there, and there was a sawmill that used to be by Sugarland Run that dates back to the 1830s. So over the years, we've collected a lot of artifacts from the park that reflect the farming history and the milling history. You see here we have some shovels, we have a hatchet, we have a draft horse, horseshoe, lots of nails. We have some blacksmith tools. We have strapping that would go around barrels and possibly groups of lumber. We also found in the park this broken piece of a Confederate spur. In the plastic cases on the walls, we have many donated items from early Herndon residents, anywhere from toy guns and old Brownie cameras to models, to things from Herndon businesses such as pharmacy bottles, old razors, old clips, old tobacco tins. Lots of these things are very interesting to look at.
Well, that was a fantastic tour of the museum, Barbara. Thank you so much for showing us around. I really think it's a great place for people to start with if they want to learn more about the town.
Thanks, May. We have over 500 different artifacts here in the museum, and Herndon is just a great place to visit, and one of those reasons is because of its history. So we hope people will come visit us. We're open on Sundays from 12 to 3 from March through December. And if people will search on Herndon Historical Society, we also have a Facebook page and a website. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.